Good evening and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Donna Leinwand, the 2009 National Press Club president, a Headliners team member, and president of DC Media Strategies. This evening, we gather not only to discuss a book, but to step inside American history through the eyes of a son. Imagine growing up in a house in Detroit where figures like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Gloria Steinem, and Berry Gordy sat in your living room to collaborate with your father. Imagine growing up also in the shadow of a man who helped shape civil rights legislation, marched alongside giants, and served in Congress for more than 50 years, while also being your pop. This is the story John Conyers III tells us in his new book, My Father's House. John Conyers Jr., the longest-serving Black congressman in U.S. history, was a leader who left a profound mark on both his city of Detroit and on the nation. He was a founder of the Congressional Black Caucus, a relentless advocate for justice, and a legislator whose vision shaped generations. Yet, My Father's House reminds us that behind the public figure was also a private man whose humanity and imperfections make his story all the more compelling. John Conyers, the son, takes us on that intimate journey, revealing both the triumphs and the complexities of his father's legacy. He reminds us that as leaders we often place on pedestals, they were also very human and faced the same struggles many of us encounter. By weaving his father's story together with his own, John offers a fresh and deeply personal perspective on the history we think we know. This book is not only an exploration of Congressman Conyers' impact on America, but also a reflection on family, identity, and belonging. In sharing this journey, he invites us to consider how legacy shapes us and how we, in turn, shape it. I was deeply honored to welcome Congressman Conyers to the National Press Club in 2009 when I was president of the club. And now it's my profound honor to welcome his son, John Conyers III, who will share his story, his insights, and his reflections on a man who was both a father and a national figure. Please join me in giving a warm National Press Club welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
All right, so we have lots of questions today, so I'm going to get, look at that. I'm going to get us right started. But I want to start, first of all, with what inspired you to write this book now, at this time.
I did not want to be an author, full disclosure. It was not part of my plan. I think Gen Z is calling this a side quest these days. It started off as, my father's book. Wilbur, I don't know if you were there. As one of my father's dear friends, family friend here. But there was a conversation that we had at Nate's house. I think you were there, where we were trying to get my dad to retire. We were having a conversation with myself, my Uncle Nate, my mom may have been there, but we were just talking to my father about like, hey, you've been in office forever. How about, taking a step in a different direction, maybe start a foundation. There's a number of ways to impact human life outside of, the legislative process. And obviously he did not, he would not hear of that. And so I began in that process. I think in 2009, I conducted my first interview with my father, just to start trying to get stuff down on record. And then he passed away before we had a book deal. Obviously what happened with, how he left office happened. And so that went away. And so in the process of trying to build that momentum back up, he passes away, and my agent, or the agent that I got rid of an agent and then found a new agent after he passed away, and we had what was left of a proposal and parts of a manuscript. And essentially my agent said, if you want this book to come out, you're going to have to write it because no one will put this book out as a book by John Conyers Jr. because he's not here to approve it and be interviewed and so on and so forth. So that is how I came to be an author.
So did you have a lot of material to work with? Had he written quite a bit, or?
Yeah, we had a lot of material to work with, but ultimately because it was now kind of from my perspective, it was very much so something that had to be reframed and recontextualized, and so there was quote unquote source material, I guess you could say, but for the most part it was, repurposed, and I had a large undertaking in writing this.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, you're writing about a relationship with your father, and fathers and sons, it's, sort of classic literature, really. So was writing the book a cathartic thing? Was it difficult? Was it fun?
All of the above. I think it was definitely cathartic. I would say that I definitely have more questions now than when I started, because you spend so much time researching and reading about and learning about, and you find out things you never knew that you thought you knew everything, and then you're discovering all these things that, oh man, I wish he was here to ask him this question. So I think I have more questions now than I had when I started. It was definitely fun though, and definitely cathartic. It was all of the above.
So what's the one question you'd ask your dad if you could?
There's one. I think what I'm most curious about is just, he spans so many eras of politics in American life, and how was he able to navigate that? I think when you think about different eras, specifically in Detroit, there's a level of corruption that existed, and then there was also organized crime component that Detroit's not really known for, but that existed. I know because this is just an aside, but I used to be a cigar smoker. I recently stopped, and one of the folks that I had cigars with was a part of that. And he tells me stories about my dad. My dad always stayed clear of that and was a great guy. But I would love to hear from my father, in particular, about how he was able to navigate all of these different constituencies, if you will, and keep his hands clean.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating to me.
So were there some stories that you struggled with to put in the book, or didn't really want to put in the book, or?
No.
But knew you had
Not
to?
really, because it's not who my father raised me to be. I think I talk about in the book that the challenge that people, and I'm sorry if I'm a little, my voice is quivering. I'm really, really cold. One of the challenges that people kind of thrust upon me that is not actually real to me is this legacy piece. And my father, in the entirety of my life, always implored me to be myself. So I never felt compelled to live up to anything. And so in writing this book and being someone who is very much my own person and a very open, honest, transparent person, I never felt that there was anything that was off limits. I think I was much more interested in being tactful, being able to express the thing without being vulgar in how I did it.
Mm-hmm. I guess, one of the stories that you alluded to is, of course, how your dad left office. There were some, it was at the height of the Me Too movement. There were some allegations of sexual harassment and a payment to one young woman. How did you handle that story in the book, and was it challenging?
Tactful. So there is the sensationalized media narrative that I'm sure some of you in this room have come to know. There is the story of living it in real time and being aware of it while aware of the situation while it was happening. And then there's a thing that I wrote about. And so for me, in seeing how it's written about and kind of knowing the reality of the situation, I felt that it was important for me to, one, not run from it because it is out in the public domain. But also to the extent that I could, without breathing more life into it, or to some extent giving more credence to the claim than what was really there, was my job to like address it head on, and from my perspective, kind of like move on from it, because it is what it is. It has been covered, and it's not my job to rehash it. Knowing the truth of the matter, you kind of have to. It's not my job to tell everybody the thing, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So as you were writing the book, I'm sure you went into the book having a certain impression of Dad. Dad is Dad. As you were writing the book, did your impression of him, did your perspective on him change? Did you think of him in a different way?
Yeah, but more so in a positive sense. I don't think I addressed it in the book, but when I was researching, there was some stuff in the basement in one of his file cabinets. It was like I don't want to say a newsletter, but Bob, he's a former press secretary for my father. What are the when they put out like press releases, or I guess it's kind of a newsletter, do you know what those are called? But there's from his office. It came from his office. It was like an essay he wrote, or like a thing he wrote. Do you know what
like an op-ed or something?
Well, it wasn't an op-ed. In whichever case, there was yeah, maybe that's what it was. But there was a newsletter that my father put out, and one of it was like from '72, and he was writing about poverty specifically. And I bring this up because it is important, because right now we're talking about the correlation between poverty and crime and all the things that, I guess it's popular culture, or it's in the media now, it's mainstream. But he was writing about this in '72 and talking about the connection between crime and joblessness and how that impacts the human condition. And he put this in the congressional record in the '70s. And so for me, whether it's you look at folks like AOC and Bernie Sanders, running with my father's legislation, that is Medicare for all, right, and taking that to the mainstream and getting the bulk of the credit, him always being ahead of the curve in terms of policy and how we look at issues and how we address issues. So it was encouraging for me to see that, like, while he may not have gotten the credit, he was always doing the work despite whether or not he would get the credit or acknowledgement, or whether people understood the importance of it, right? It was, this is the thing that needs to be done, this is the thing that needs to be said, so I am going to go do it. And I think that was it was just great to see that, like, I guess he is who I thought he was.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. There were, almost anyone who's covered Washington probably covered, John Conyers up until, I guess, 10 years ago or so, 8 years ago. And so he did cross over many, many eras. But one thing that I remember very distinctly is how often and how every year he reintroduced legislation to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a national holiday, and the persistence that he had around that. Was that something that he ever spoke about with you, and was it a frustrating thing for him? And do you remember when it finally passed?
I'm younger than that legislation, so I don't remember when it passed, or I'm younger than the date when it passed. So no, I don't remember that. I do remember his reverence. My father and MLK are only 5 months, almost to the day. I think MLK is the January 15th, 1929. My father was May 16th, 1929. So, but he had reverence for what he called one of his best friends and the greatest human being that ever lived. And so for him, it was a way to remember his dear friend, a way to honor his legacy, and also commemorate the work and make sure that we meditate and think about what Dr. King was trying to get us all to see, which is much more than I have a dream. And I think, yeah, that's the crux of it. He talked about the importance of us remembering him and his work.
So you describe your childhood home, actually, on 7 Mile in Detroit, as a place where history sort of walked through the door all the time. What kind of memories do you have of who came through and who you met and what it was like?
That's so many people. Like whether it's Jesse Jackson, I think one of my memories is Barry Gordy and my dad went to the same high school, so I just remember Barry Gordy sending like these massive, ornate Christmas cards. Like I remember one time, it was like a solar system like that he sent. But it was like packaged. It was like and I remember like playing with it. It was like the silver thing, and it was like there was like playing. It was like the craziest thing, but it came from Barry Gordy, and there was like a picture, and it was like that thing. Like in terms of history, like my father being connected to like whether it's Barry Gordy, Jesse Jackson, Stevie Wonder, and then always playing music, like getting literal music lessons, but like in the oral tradition from my father about, hey, this is a jazz ballad of Bye Bye Blackbird, or in a sentimental mood, but he would be like, do you know that there are actually lyrics to these songs? Because as a kid, you're listening to jazz, there are no words, but he's educating me in real time. Like, yes, this is a jazz ballad, but there are actually words to this song. And so educating me about Lena Horne or Billie Holiday singing their versions. Like, those are the types of like things that I remember the most. More so than like people, it's just like this cultural education in Black history and working up through the years to the present about like all these different people and things that are like so important to who we are and how we exist and the context with which we exist in this country.
Did you realize you were young? I mean, you're excited about Barry Gordy's Christmas gift as like a solar system, right? So you were young when all this was happening. Did you realize how historically important these folks were, or are they just
Absolutely
like
not.
no?
But like the Barry Gordy thing is something that like I reflect on, or I've begun to reflect on as an adult. Once I realized who Barry Gordy was, like I remember it saying Barry Gordy, but that didn't mean anything to me. But like once I realized who that was, and I'm like, wait, what was happening? Like that's crazy. But I think what I do remember early on is like the stark contrast between like how I grew up and the way my cousins grew up. So like for those that haven't read the book, there is a age gap between my mother and father, right? So my father, silent generation, poverty is poverty, right? Great Depression, he survived the Great Depression. If you were poor then, like everybody was poor. Like it wasn't like the welfare didn't exist yet. It was like if you didn't have anything, like no one had anything, right? Versus like my mother came up at the advent of, the crack epidemic, violence, like gun violence as we know it, right? And so I have sensibilities from both worlds. And so my father being established and that side of the family being established, when I would go with them, it was a very different experience versus like my mother and her brothers and sisters having children close to my age. I would be with them a lot. And so I think the first time it really became clear to me was when I came back from DC with my father, and we flew back on Air Force One. And then like that same night or that same week, I went to go hang out with my family members who lived in a very, very different circumstance than I did. And I just remember like that was the first time where I like, oh, there's something different here, right? And then as I've grown, or as I grew, I also noticed that like, I don't know that like, I do recognize that I have some level of smarts and intelligence, but like I don't, in the moments then, and as I've gotten further away from those moments, what I have and become more well-read in terms of how life plays out for people of not the best circumstances. It's not that I am so smart. It's that like my cousins, like I have cousins that are like super, super smart. They just didn't have the same access to education. They didn't have the same access to opportunity as me. And that's just by virtue of like my mother marrying the right person, my dad being who he was. Like that's just how that plays out. And so like I think that became clear to me at like a pretty early age.
Yeah. So in the foreword of the book, it's written by Michael Eric Dyson, and he talks about all these giants of the 1960s and the 70s, and Coleman Young, the first black mayor of Detroit, the preacher, Charles Adams.
Don't forget Frederick G. Sampson. Just got to shout him out.
Oh, yeah. C.L. Franklin, who Aretha's dad is, as he's now known. I think, Damon,
Keith.
Keith, the judge,
Yep.
right? So you've got, John Conyers in the middle of all that. Was there a time when you realized not just that he was a congressman and he was important, but that people thought of him as a civil rights icon, a giant in the community, on par with Charles Adams and Coleman Young?
Yeah, he was always dad, but I think even though I talk about in the book, like, the angsty period where, like, me and my dad were at odds, I've always had a reverence for my father and his work. I don't think there was never, I should say it this way, there was never an opportunity for me to not know who my dad was, or, like, the impact that he had, just by virtue of, like, him taking me at a young age with him to certain things, or, like, even in the angsty period still having to show up to, like, award stuff, There was never an opportunity for me to not know or recognize, like, my father's contribution not only to this country but to the city of Detroit.
Speaking of Detroit, give us your assessment of Detroit, and, like, what do you think it was about the city that propelled so many black citizens into the top levels, this important roles within the country's, like, sort of economic and political life?
Well, I think it starts with the ability to, like, the income that was created and the middle class that was created as a result of the automotive industry being there. And then you have folks like my grandfather who are instrumental in helping to shape the UAW and getting involved in the other unions. And then I think also when you look at what happened after the rebellion, and Wilbur, feel free to correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong. I think after the rebellion and you see white flight, right, there's not really a choice, right? Like, if all of, or the majority of white folks leave the city and we are left to run the city, like, we gotta do it, right? We have to run the city. So I think it happens that way. And then you have a leader like Coleman Young who prioritizes creating these opportunities for black businesses and being able to get them these contracts so that they are able to establish themselves and their businesses, and really become a part of shaping and building and charting a path forward in the city of Detroit.
Yeah. So were there any moments when you sort of wished that you had a more ordinary upbringing, that you weren't having to go to awards and fly on Air Force One?
No, I don't. No, I think I wouldn't be me.
Yeah.
Good, bad, or ugly, whatever has happened in my life, I don't have any regrets. There are things I probably wish hadn't happened, but I wouldn't be the person I am. I wouldn't have the lessons I have. So no.
No. Okay. So, you talked about the influence your dad had on you. Are there some other people that you met, through your dad that had also had some influence on you? Public figures?
Yeah, a bunch.
Could you share a few memories that you have?
Trying to pick some good ones. Right now, I would probably say Don Peebles is number one on that list. For those that don't know who Don Peebles is the single largest owner of, or the black man who owns the most land in the United States of America. He's a real estate developer. He also, in turn, I actually quote him in the foreword, or not the foreword, the foreword. The prologue. But he is someone who he started as an intern for my father and then has gone on to become massively successful in real estate. He's someone that has helped shape kind of the person I've become since my father passed away. He's been instrumental. Like, he spoke at my father's funeral, and has always made himself available. I think, who else? Jesse Jackson is someone that is really, really important. And then Maxine Waters. Maxine Waters, has always made herself available to me. Always, whatever I need, she's a phone call away. So I would say those three folks are probably really, really important.
Yeah. When you think about how many interns there must have been, that have gone on to some great things. So, were there any challenges growing up in those sort of circumstances with a dad whose job's taken him away from home, who's a public figure? Was it difficult?
Yeah, I think, when you don't, at 35 and kind of understanding mission-driven work and understanding purpose, right? And understanding that sometimes purpose comes with, there's a level of sacrifice that it comes with. And when you're 7 years old, or you're 12 years old, or 13, or even 15 or 18, you don't understand that. And so I don't think I didn't have the perspective. Now, granted, I probably would have taken some vacations, even if I had that purpose. But you just don't understand the passion that someone has for a thing. Whatever. For him, it was politics and people and improving people's quality of life. You don't understand it. And so there's a level of anger, resentment that builds up because you see your friends with, their dads are at games, their dads are, able to be there more often. So yeah, I think maybe that's the thing that existed, but I have perspective on it now. I understand, why. Even looking at the circumstance we have now, we're losing, I didn't inherit money, I inherited rights. And I don't think my dad necessarily did that with me in mind, because I don't know that my dad ever wanted a family. If we're having a real conversation, I don't know that a family was on his big board until he had one. And so for me, most of what I inherited was the rights that are now being chipped away at. And so I understand purpose now, because that's a thing that I'm focused on. Okay, well, some of the stuff has gone away. How do we maintain the stuff that is that's still left over, and then build back up towards the things that we've lost?
Well, that brings me to a kind of a moment in history that we're at now. How do you think your dad would be responding to what's going on with government now? What would he expect of citizens? What would he expect of his constituents? And what would he want people to do?
Well, there's an article he wrote for Time magazine about Trump being the next second coming of Nixon. So I will leave you all to go read that, because he tells you exactly how he feels about Trump and all the things. But I would say, as it relates to, I spend a lot of my time here in D.C. The energy in the city feels much different with the National Guard roaming around. And so I think he would be disappointed that more folks aren't in the streets. It's not normal. This is the National Guard being deployed. And, I walked from a friend's house to Union Station or Penn Station, and I saw maybe 12 National Guardsmen. That's not normal. That's wholly un-American. And, more specifically to unpack that, I know what's identity politics has kind of become taboo because we've lost so many elections and they've blamed it on identity politics. But I think about who feels safe because there are National Guardsmen in the streets. Certainly not someone that looks like me. When now, they don't need a reason to stop you. They don't need a reason to imprison you. They don't have to have any cause. So for me, when we're talking about, and it's the overarching theme of the movement, right? Make America great again. Make America great again for whom? Because when you have people that can walk around armed with the implied ability to use force, who are they using that force against? Because historically they're not using it against people that look like you. And so I think that my father would expect that we would be in the streets raising hell and, coming to D.C. or going to whatever state capital to say that this isn't going to stand. So it's a little disappointing that more folks aren't doing that, and we're just sitting around acting like that's normal.
Why do you think that is?
People are, excuse my language, people are fucking tired. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that at the press club, but I'm going to be candid and use candor. People are tired. I mean, people don't have money. People, they I don't know if you saw the jobs numbers. I don't know, more specifically, I don't know if you saw the first jobs numbers. And then now the doctor jobs numbers still are bad. And so, people don't have jobs. People don't have money. People are trying to survive. And so when you ask why more people aren't, it's very difficult. I also don't think I think Americans take for granted what the democratic process is. You have other places that just don't take that for granted. They understand that it was hard won and fought for. And when you have it made for 60 years, it's very difficult to understand, and you take it for granted. It's very difficult to understand what you have to do to maintain it or get back to a place where you have those rights. Yeah.
So you think your dad would be telling folks to get in the streets and raise their voices?
100%.
Yeah. So now he encouraged you, I think, to run for office, and you have run for office. How do you feel personally about politics, about being in the fray? Do you see that? Is that your mission?
It's part of it. I don't think it's the end-all, be-all. I think that what's the best way to, without being long-winded? I mean, politics is important. It is a part of the process. We need more folks to be involved in politics from top to bottom. I think more importantly, we need more folks to understand that politics are a part of everything. The political process controls royalty rates. The political process controls, if you are into fashion, politics controls your IP. It makes it so that countries can't just rip it off and sell it back to you in America, right? But when you, for example, in my experience during this press run for this book, it was very, very difficult to get coverage in culture magazines or magazines that talk about, music or any other thing, because they don't talk about politics. When politics controls those things, right? You will talk around the thing. You will talk around what is Trump doing, or you'll have an artist come and sit for an interview to address Trump, but you will not let a politician or someone that is viewed as political come to your platform or give them a platform to reach your audience to help them draw the through lines or draw the connections. And I think that one of the things that I have been considering a lot is, and I see a lot of myself in him, is JFK Jr.'s George magazine, right? Where he tried to show people that all of these things were connected. And it wasn't unsuccessful, it just wasn't the most successful at the time. But I think that is a thing that needs to be talked about more, in that all of these things are connected and you have to be involved in the process. So, yeah.
So are there any lessons that your dad shared with you, while you were growing up, something privately that you think people might be surprised to learn?
He didn't believe in fairness in the sense that he would tell me, or more specifically, there's a story in the book that I tell, which is the guiding light in my life, where it's two things. Everything's connected, and the second one is that there was something that happened to my mother, and she was talking to my father about it. And he was like, she said, that's not fair. And my dad said, fair? Who ever said anything about fair, right? And understanding that life is not fair. So the obstacles you face, the challenges you face, everyone has their own thing. And so part of this life thing is overcoming. It is not fair. And so that is probably the thing that I would share with people the most, is that he understood that life isn't fair, and that whatever it is, you got to figure it out and overcome it anyway.
Yeah. So, you told us a little about your angsty period there. When did your relationship with your dad start to change? And how, I mean, did you get closer as you got older? And how did that manifest itself?
It manifested itself, I think I was like 19 or 20, and me going to my dad. And the first time, I just told him, like, you know, you were a terrible father. Yeah, I was not like, I'm not a I don't sugarcoat things. It's not how I am. I'm very confrontational in that, like, let's get it out of the way. And then the second, like, he basically said, so what? He met me where I was. Like, oh, I see you. Okay, so what, right? And the second time, like, I approached him, still confrontational, but like in a much more like, hey, like, I'm not trying to like bash you, but I just want to let you know, like, this is where I'm coming from. This was my experience with you as a father, and like, but I want to have a relationship. And so, you know, he also met that. And so we were able to forge a relationship from there, like a meaningful one, a close one. And I would say that up until he passed away, like, my father was my best friend.
So, you know, if you were alive right now, what advice would you be seeking?
I've not thought of that. That's a good question.
Every once in a while.
I would probably want to talk to him about specifically, so there's a piece of legislation that my father had called the Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment Bill. And I think it's prescient that he had it X amount of years ago. And we are in a place in this country where our infrastructure is crumbling. Obviously, we need jobs. He would also talk, in the Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment Bill was a national jobs guarantee. And when you look at the advent of AI, but AI is not able to build roads. It is not able to put down train tracks. It is not able to do HVAC. It's not able to do any of those things. The Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment Bill, not only its importance, but the thought process behind it, like and on a granular level, like I get why it's important, but like on a granular level, because my father was like very granular and methodical and why he did all these things. I would love to hear from him about like why we need that now and walk me through it. I think that would be very, very. I'd be curious to hear from him about that.
Yeah. So is that the issue that you're most passionate about now, or is there something else that's on your mind?
In terms of politics, or
Yeah, in terms of politics, or
is full employment the most?
yeah.
I would say the thing that I'm most passionate about is getting everyone to see that everything is connected, right? Like, my background is in music. I started in the music business. From the age of 16 to the age of 26 or 25, I was a songwriter. So my passion is getting folks who primarily think that, like, if I accumulate wealth, then everything is all right. My primary and foremost concern is getting them to understand that, like, that is absolutely not the case, and that, like, there's a conversation about the Democratic Party not having a black agenda, right? But there's not a black agenda because black candidates aren't funded by black people for the most part, right? So if my thing is, like, all of this is connected, and we know that royalty rates are controlled by Congress, we know that protection of IP is through Congress, then we need, like, black wealth and black folks to, like, get in the game and support candidates that are aligned with their interests, right? And so that is getting folks in the fashion industry, in the entertainment industry, the actors, athletes to, like, really get together and, like, focus on that and putting up and supporting candidates and using their platform, like Harry Belafonte did when Martin Luther King was alive, he was the biggest entertainer in the world at the time, and having MLK come on stage to address the crowd before he performed, right? Like, me getting folks to see and understand and draw that connection is vitally important. So that's where my focus is. Like, yes, the jobs thing is important, but, like, before we get to the jobs thing, we got to get to understanding why politics is important in a general sense.
So are you thinking about another run for office?
I am, yeah.
You are, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so give us a little hint at your campaign plan, your issues, your platforms?
I haven't decided where I'm going to run, like what office I'm going to run for. But I think the crux of my positions are like focusing on education, political education, academic education, those things. It's vital. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I think there are obviously more things to address. I think if housing is one that is, in Michigan we have a thing called preemption, where the state has basically said that there can't be rent control. And so for a city like Detroit, and you asked me about it earlier, is a place that's rapidly developing. Folks are coming in from out of town. There's speculative investment from folks out of town. We're having natives who've been there for 50 plus years, 25 years, however long, are being priced out, and we're not able to do the things like a California or a New York to make sure that they still have a place in Detroit. And so like stuff like that is priority to me.
Yeah. So now you've run twice before for Congress, and what are some of the lessons that you learned from those experiences? And I can't believe you want to do it again.
I don't know that I want to do it again. I think that it's like I'm very much a person. If I have an idea, right? So like when I was in college, a friend of mine, we were going to start a clothing line called Essentials, right? And now there is a company called Essentials. It's a guy named Jerry Lorenzo. He has Essentials. He has Fear of God. I believe fundamentally that like just because you get an idea, you're not the only person that's going to get the idea. You got the idea so that you can go off and execute it. If you don't go out and execute it, it came to you for a reason. The universe, God, whatever you believe in, like it is supposed to be in the world, whether it's through you or someone else is going to come. And so I'm very much a person who believes that like if the thing that came to me comes into existence, then it is no longer for me to go chase that thing. The times that I have run for office are because no one is speaking to the issues and they're overlooking issues and they're not addressing those things head on. If at any point those things between now and when I declare to run for office next, those things come to fruition and I'm able to support someone else from a different vantage point, then I'll do that. But I'm very much like I'll do it myself type of person. So the reason for running is because like no one is doing it or speaking to the issues or trying to connect the dots for folks and bridge that gap. And so I guess I gotta go do it.
Okay. So what lessons have you learned from those previous campaigns?
Not to be shallow, but like you need a lot of money to run for office. You need a lot of money to run for office. And so, I mean, I don't know. If I'm being transparent, with respect to the other candidates in the field, they weren't better candidates than me. They didn't have more congressional experience than me. I spent 27 years in D.C. building relationships, establishing relationships with folks on and off the Hill. So I can't say that they knew more. And if we're looking at it, like they still haven't been in D.C. longer than me. So I don't know if they have, better relationships than me. I think they just were better financed, right? So they're able to amplify their voice and their platform more. And so, I still think that I was the better candidate. It's just now it's about focusing on raising the capital to let everybody know that.
What role do you think social media could play in your campaign? I know you have some presence.
No, social media I think social media is really good for shopping and letting people, advertising your message, and it's good for like letting people know that you have a product that they can buy. But politics, if it were that important, we'd have a woman in the White House right now, respectfully. So I think that like politics will forever be a person-to-person, a combat sport, a person-to-person type of thing where I got to come shake your hand, I got to meet you at on the doorstep. I mean, one thing that like, my takeaway, that I was able to do what I was able to do, coming forth with, I put up $60,000 of my own money and was able to raise an additional, I think, 40 to 50 grand, right? I was able to come in forth and win in terms of dollars per vote because I was on doors every day, and people are telling me you're the first person that's come to my door in 5 years. Things like that. Like that's how you're able to, win people over. And I think if I can really quickly, I think the fundamental issue that we have in politics today is that the party that I'm a part of is continually telling people how bad the other guy is instead of demonstrating the value that they offer over that person. And I don't mean demonstrating by telling someone, right? I don't know if I should use this example, but when you're dating a woman, right, as a man, you can't keep telling her hey, I'm the better guy. You have to show up with action. You have to show her and win her over, right? And I think that especially when I look at the Democratic Party in Michigan and the things that they did when they had both the House and the Senate, they had an opportunity to pass preemption. And the legislator told me that they did not have the political will, or they didn't want to jeopardize the folks that were in purple seats. And so now what you have is that you've lost both the House and the Senate because you didn't pass any of the things that you ran on. And so instead of not passing things because you're scared, you should pass the thing and deal with the consequences afterward. At least you would have delivered on a promise that you made, right? If people vote you out because of that, then so be it, but you delivered. And I think so often the party that I'm a part of often just we don't want to rock the boat. We want to play it safe so we continue to stay in power. But there's a saying, fortune favors the bold. You have to be bold in leadership, right? Part of getting power is to wield it, to demonstrate it. And I think that part of what the party that I'm not a part of does so well is that they wield it very, very, I wouldn't say they wield it very well, but they do what they say they're going to do, and they do the things that they want to do with the power that they acquire.
Okay. All right. So be bold and buy flowers, I guess.
Yes, be bold. Yeah, and buy flowers. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are almost at the end of our time, but I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. But before I do, I want to take a moment to thank the Headliners team chair, Jen Judson, and the members who assisted with this event, as well as Club Executive Director Didier Sauger, and the entire club staff for making this event possible. I'd also like to thank our audience for all these wonderful questions that you sent me and for being here tonight. We really appreciate that you're here. And then I would also like to give you this mug.
Oh, thank you very much.
As a token of our appreciation.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Your father received one as well, and I had the honor of handing it to him in 2009.
Thank you
I think
very
he
much.
had more than one,
He
actually.
did have, I think so as well.
So yeah, he had two. Okay, so now you have a matching set. And now let me ask a couple of questions because we just have a few minutes left. So you said you spent 27 years in Washington, D.C. What is your advice? Should members of Congress try and raise their kids in D.C., or should they be at home back in the district?
I don't have an answer for that. I would say that I'm a Detroiter because I was raised in Detroit. I think it just depends on the relationship you want to have. I think that what I admire Paul Ryan for is that he prioritized hey, we're gonna get out of here because I got to get back to I want my kids to be from where I'm from, and it's very, very important for me to have a relationship with my kids, which is part of why he left office when he could have stayed and held on to power. And so I think it's about what you prioritize, right? If being there for your family and doing all those things is important, then you'll figure it out. I think also what comes with and what I've seen from folks that raise their families here is that obviously there's a disconnect with the district, and they have a different relationship to the community that they come from and relationship to the system and to their participation in the structures, the white supremacist structures and the American capitalist structure, right? So it just depends.
Okay. So one more question for you, and I've just been handed that time card, so this is probably the last one. But your father endorsed you for office.
Yeah.
Was that a surprise? And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, but not because of what you think. I was not surprised that he endorsed me because I knew he and I, for the entirety, and I talk about this in the book, I just so happened to, the first office that I ran for that you all know about was United States Congress. There had been conversations prior to that privately about me running for other offices. So whether that is like in, I think, 2015, I was supposed to run for city clerk, but it would have been 2017. I was supposed to run for city clerk. But because the woman who was the city clerk had just run against my father, my dad was like, absolutely not. It's going to look like retaliation, right? I was supposed to run for city council. There are a number of things that like I was supposed to run for to prepare me to run for United States Congress because people thought that I wasn't being prepared or groomed for that. So no, I wasn't surprised. It was just more so a surprise to everybody because they're not privy to the personal conversation between my father and I about what I should run for.
Okay.
I tried to make that quick. We got time for one more? You got time for one more? One more?
Yeah, we do. All
okay.
right, we have time for one more. So let's see. Okay, I'll ask a writing question. So you said you weren't a writer, and you hadn't. Well, you were songwriter.
Songwriter,
you weren't like a biography writer. Do you see more writing in your future? Have you gotten the hang of it?
Getting the hang of it is strong. I don't know if you ever get the hang of writing. You just got to write and edit, and then write, and then edit some more. A lot of writing is editing. But yeah, so there's a book that I'm working on now, which in the Brotherhood chapter, I talk about my best friend from college, or one of my best friends from college. He passed away. He died by suicide. And so I talk about, the book is about black male friendship, masculinity, grief, and specifically there will be a chapter about male friendship between a straight man and I'm forgetting about this, straight men and gay men, and then straight men and platonic relationships between straight men and women, right? Having that friendship and the importance of those friendships. As someone who went to Morehouse College and coming from the Midwest, right, which like I went to college in the early or the mid 2000s, right? And so coming from a place where like it was nowhere near as progressive as it is now, and my background not being one that is as progressive in terms of like acceptance of folks in the LGBTQ community, right? Getting that exposure, being exposed to that, being able to be in community with and see the humanity in folks, right? Because part of why we have this disconnect and not understanding folks of any background, whether it's of other races, of other sexual backgrounds or racial gender identities, right? Is that we are not in community with them. We're not exposed to that, so we are afraid of it. And so having friends that are in the community and being able to share space and learn from has dramatically shaped and formed me and molded me into the man that I have become. Similarly, I was with my best friend, my best female friend, when I first got here, and we went to lunch, and being able to have a woman to hold you accountable, to push you to be better, and those are the things that are like important, and I don't think we talk about that enough. And then also the last thing I'll say is like in the friendship with the men, saying I love you, right? Like these are all my Morehouse brothers, right? Being able to say I love you, and not like, for reference, like my Uncle Nate, my dad's little brother, I've said I love you to him since as far as I can remember. He's never said it back, which is also like the reason why this book is important, is because I talk about how my father, being someone of the silent generation and saying I love you to his son, coming from a time where like men did not emote in that way, like how that transformed me and shaped me and molded me into the person that I am. And so to have this friendship or this friend group where we always, like before we, get off the phone, we say I love you, or in our chat, we will text I love you, like that level of tenderness or softness and being in community in that way is very, very important. And it's not something that is talked about as much. And certainly not to use the modern buzzwords, a cisgender, heteronormative male friendship, right? It's not something that is modeled often. And so for me, I think it's important to put that into the world and like create a conversation and dialogue about how important that is.
Okay. Well, we will look forward to your next book. And thank you very much,
Thank
John,
you.
for
Thank you all for
joining
being
us
here.
at the National Press Club.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.